Hey folks, I'm going to do something that I've never done before, at least not on this channel. I'm going to give a few of my thoughts on the state of DCS as it is now here in early June 2020. It's the 11th of June, actually. If that's not what you're looking for, no worries. Just close the browser tab or surf away. No harm, no foul. I've been an avid flight sim enthusiast for pretty much as long as I can remember. My father got me into flight sims on our family Amstrad 8086 way back in the 80s, and it's been a passion of mine ever since. I've played pretty much every major civilian and military flight simulator software package ever since. Everything from the early Microprose Falcons through the awesome Janes Sims in the 90s, Falcon 4.0 when it was released in 1998, and then of course Free Falcon and a bit of BMS since, Lock On Modern Air Combat, and now of course its descendant DCS. I used to play offline predominantly, mostly due to the fact that I lead a pretty busy life. I'm a father to four amazing kids, and I'm a part owner and CEO of a startup cybersecurity and software development business. So I don't have an awful lot of time, and I certainly don't have the ability to make big kind of time commitments to other people and then to hold on to them. It's always been a bit of a struggle for me due to how busy my life is. However, I recently discovered the Hoggit servers and their kind of drop-in player versus environment approach. And while I'm sure Hoggit isn't for everybody, it was a perfect fit for me. Since then, I've discovered Tactical DCS, the Tactical DCS community run by a guy named Pascal, a great guy, and that community is by far the best community of DCS hobbyists I've come across, and I'm having an absolute ton of fun with them, flying with them lately. DCS as a software platform is an interesting platform. The flight modeling is pretty awesome. I'm sure some people would disagree with that, but to me, the layperson, I think they're pretty cool. The graphics are jaw-dropping at points, and the huge amounts of variability in the sim mean that there's likely to be something of appeal to such a wide swathe of flight sim enthusiasts. You can fly everything from a warbird through to a fast jet. You can get in an A10 and get your BERT on. I guess my one complaint about DCS is that while the underlying platform isn't too bad, I'll talk about the platform itself in a sec, the sim broadly exists in a sandbox. The scripted campaigns that you can get a hold of or that come with the sim aren't too bad, but their scripted nature for me is a bit like the simulation is on rails. Now, I'm not an expert on warfare. I do have a national defense kind of background. I'm not a warfare expert, but I have been an infantry officer, and I have been to Afghanistan during the global war on terror. And what I can say is that war is never on rails, or at least very rarely. It's fluid, it's organic, it's chaotic. It doesn't care about you. You're nothing more than a very small cog in a very huge wheel amongst 100,000 very large wheels. I guess this has led me to the conclusion that while the flight model and the weapons platforms of DCS are kind of cool, and again, I'm sure there are people that will disagree with that, the single player content of the sim is lacking to me quite significantly. And this is where the multiplayer community has really stepped up to the plate and created content that keeps us entertained as enthusiast flight sim pilots. But while the multi-day campaigns in Hoggit and other servers, like Through the Inferno and Tactical DCS, um, are amazing, and in my opinion, the developers of these missions are heroes. They still can't overcome the fact that DCS is lacking a genuine war-like campaign. It still feels a bit hollow, like it's just a big multi-day kind of Call of Duty multiplayer session with jets instead of near immortal muscle-bound gunfighters. Combine that together with the fact that I think the underlying engine of DCS is struggling. The polish and veneer that exists is exactly that. If you scratch the surface underneath, there's a lot to be found wanting. It seems obvious to me that the underlying foundation of the software is groaning and creaking with the multiple add-ons that keep getting massaged into the engine. I would guess that the underlying of DCS, the engine, comes from the early days of maybe the flanker games that preceded Lock On Modern Air Combat, and that architecture was in no way designed to handle the huge variety and very contemporary nature of add-ons that ED keep pushing into the engine. This has led me to kind of three key conclusions. Firstly, DCS is great at simulating battles, but not amazing at simulating war. Secondly, that without the DCS multiplayer community, especially content creators like the guys at Hoggit, Tactical DCS, or Through the Inferno, my DCS icon would barely ever get double clicked, and I'd probably be hundreds of hours in on Red Dead Redemption right now. And thirdly, that the scalability of DCS, I believe, is at its peak right now due to the limitations in the older underlying architecture. And things like new additions are fighting against a law of diminishing returns on effort, making it harder to get greater fidelity from the older platform that's creaking. Again, these are shortcomings that I can see beyond. I can get beyond them and still enjoy. I think there's a lot of fun to be had in DCS, dodging SAMs from the volcano of death on Persian Gulf at War, or absolutely smashing a supercarrier case 1 recovery on the tactical DCS dynamic mission server, or getting a guns kill on a Su-27 in Georgia at War. While I seriously miss the immersive feeling of there's a war going on and you're just a participant of Falcon 4's amazing campaign, I can take happiness from those other good things about DCS. That is, of course, until the patch released yesterday, the 10th of June, 2020. Now, before I get into things on this topic, I want to state unequivocally that I'm a fan of Eagle Dynamics. In a world where pretty much no major development house or publisher will touch a combat flight sim with a barge pole, ED have stood up and said, "Come to us, all you waifs and strays. We're here for you." And I think they deserve some credit for that. And regardless of what I'm about to say, critical or not, I'd suggest that while constructive criticism of any vendor by their clients is okay, verbal abuse is not okay. It's never okay. At the end of the day, a person might not be happy with the state of their product, but that doesn't give them the right to verbally abuse those responsible for building that product. While it's easy to depersonify Big Nui as it's a nickname that you read through the amazing disparity that is afforded us by the internet, on the other side of that nickname, on the other side of the internet, is a person who doesn't deserve to be verbally abused because your software isn't working the way you want it to. All of that said, the challenge with DCS in my mind is that it has a split release architecture. Stable on one branch, official beta on another. For the most part, the single player missions and campaigns that are designed for the stable branch, with the multiplayer servers and the very cool content that I was mentioning before focusing on the official beta branch. This means that multiplayer flight simmers tend to get access to newly released content earlier, but can often pay through it through the instability of the branch that they're using, the open beta branch. Meanwhile, the stable branch simmers have a more stable environment, but suffer from a lack of dynamic content, especially if they want to overcome what in my opinion is DCS's lack of single player content by immersing themselves in a multiplayer environment. The official beta patch released on the 10th of June was bad. I mean, really bad. I don't work at ED, and while I hear all kinds of rumors about what happened in relation to the release of that patch, I don't really want to speculate. What I do know is that the patch was released and it basically broke the game, causing all kinds of havoc. Radars broken, damage models not working, etc. And as I said previously, I'm the CEO of a software business, and while I don't build video games or flight sims, I do know that a beta branch of code is designed to test new features that are destined to be rolled out into production. In this case, the stable branch of the codebase. Again, I don't know if this is indeed what was going on with the patch release or if some other mistake happened. And if I'm honest, I don't really care. The compelling thing for me, and I'd suggest most of us, is that for those of us that play multiplayer, this has kind of broken the game. And it's meant that we've had to roll back versions to keep playing with some semblance of stability. Whether you believe that that is a valid course of action and is justified, I'd suggest that rolling back versions in order to be able to keep enjoying the software is not conducive to building support in your client base. In this case, those of us simmers who want to fly and fight and have a good time in multiplayer. Now, I can hear the cries now, and I can assure you I get it. This is a beta, and you should expect some instability. That is 100% true, and I completely get it. But given many of us use multiplayer-driven content to overcome those single-player content shortcomings, this paints us into a corner, and it's why we're seeing the somewhat vociferous response that we're seeing lately. Again, I don't condone bullying, harassment, or verbal abuse of any kind, but I do understand why people feel so passionately about this topic. The predominant way to get interesting dynamic content and good air traffic control or communications is to fly online. And rightly or wrongly, right now flying online means using the official beta branch, and that's broken. Whether it's justified or not, this is a crummy outcome for those of us who just want to jump in and have a good time with some mates. One of the other things I hear a lot is don't be so hard on ED. They're the only ones left making flight sims, so they shouldn't face criticism. I I think that's bullshit, and I simply don't get it, and I don't agree with it. While I certainly applaud ED for staying true to their roots and making flight sims for us, they certainly aren't above criticism and a reproach. And in fact, I'd suggest that any software business that doesn't get feedback from their clients will ultimately be doomed to face irrelevance at best, critical and commercial failure at worst. So while I agree that we should laud ED for their successes, Supercarrier comes to mind here, that was awesome. We absolutely should call them out when something doesn't go well. Again, heeding my warnings about bullying and verbal abuse. One of the things that I've always been quite critical of ED about, and this doesn't diminish my love of ED and what they're doing, but I have been critical about them in the past in the fact that I believe they have a release schedule that's too overlapping. And while I enormously appreciate the Viper in game, and I can't wait to fly it, um, I can't help but feel that the decision to release the Viper into early access while the Hornet still had such a significant amount of its developmental roadmap left to be completed, tested, and rolled into production seems ludicrous to me. So where does this all leave me? I've loved DCS lately. I've started this very channel because I love flying in DCS, and I hugely appreciate and love what the amazing guys and gals at Hoggett through the Inferno and Tactical DCS have done. I've been inspired to create this channel and jump online by guys like Hellrain82 and Ralphie Dude. Um, and while this appreciation runs deep, and I don't blame ED for adding instability into a testing branch, a beta branch, rather than the production branch of their code, this latest patch has made me take a step back and consider what flight sims I want to give my time to. I've decided that I'm certainly not going to give up on DCS, regardless of the recent hiccups and some of the deep shortcomings that I mentioned previously on regarding DCS. I still think the goods significantly outweigh the bads when it comes to DCS, and I'm going to stick with that sim as it continues to grow and mature. All of that said, I think it is time for me to move some of my eggs, my flight sim eggs, into a different basket. It's been years since I've flown a benchmark sims modded version of Falcon 4.0. I'm pretty sure it was something like 4.32 or even earlier when I flew it last. What I do remember is that it was back in 2010. So that's a full decade since I launched that sim. So I'm sure a lot's moved on, and the stuff that hasn't moved on, I've probably forgotten anyways. So it's a relatively steep learning curve for me. But I have recently reinstalled or installed Falcon BMS 4.34, and I've been getting back up to speed with the sim. Don't get me wrong, it's got its own shortcomings. The graphics and special effects aren't amazing, and the 2D interface makes my eyes bleed, especially in windowed mode on a 4K monitor. It's painful. But the accuracy of the Viper systems is incredible. The fidelity is immense. The community is small but dedicated and very helpful, especially on Falcon Lounge on the Discord. But most importantly, the campaign engine is simply staggering, especially when you consider that the engine is now 22 years old. When I fire up a campaign in BMS, I truly feel the awesome immersion of being in the midst of a real war between nations. And that's a feeling that DCS has never given me, even on Hoggett through the Inferno or Tactical DCS. Flight sim happiness between DCS and BMS isn't a zero-sum game, so it's time for me to stop treating it like it is. To be clear, if you came to this channel looking for DCS content, you will continue to get that content. I'm not going to give up on DCS, regardless of this recent patch. But I am going to start flying BMS a bit more, and thus you will see some more BMS content mixed in with the DCS stuff, especially in the short term as ED tries to get to grips with the latest issues regarding the patch. That's it. I'll jump off my soapbox for now. If you've got any thoughts, you want to talk about it, no problem. If you want to disagree and debate, no problem. Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, I hope you and your families are all well and staying healthy during this pandemic. Samurai out.